Hey, welcome to The Balancing Act. It feels like it's been a hot minute, but we're here and we want to kind of build a discussion that we promised, a discussion that came out of our conversation with Jon Owen. Jon Owen, who is the pastor and CEO of the Wayside Chapel in Sydney, an extraordinary guy. Yeah. Really, an extraordinary guy who's doing really interesting and challenging things for the gospel. In his own local context. And we had him on The Balancing Act, and we really wanted to drill down on this question: has the church abdicated responsibility of social welfare, social concern, social engagement to NGOs, to the different organisations that are still faith-based in a sense, but have we outsourced them to take care of the hard things of engagement, social engagement?
It's a great conversation.
It was a banger.
But before we get there, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Thanks, Nick. Although my voice is still a little bit raspy. I don't know what it is. It could have been the rugby. It could have been. And I'm sure it certainly played a part.
Good, eh?
We had fun. We had fun.
Pretty cool.
It was really cool to
watch Australia lose.
Bro, I have a really hard time with this because, mate, Australia is giving you a life, and then and beyond all of that, your son was on my shoulders singing the national anthem with me.
Something your boys can't even do. So we move on.
Oh, that's not true. But you were going for Australia.
I was. It was actually so much fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. But it was until I was shouting like you, but for some reason, I don't know, my voice hasn't bounced back. But I'm doing all right. Are you doing well?
I'm okay.
Nice haircut, by the way. I like that.
Thank you. And I was getting a bit annoyed with my long hair, so I was like...
To be honest with you, I thought you were joining a hippie commune there at one point.
I was trying, but I can't persevere.
Ash won't let you. Hey, let's jump into this conversation that we had with Jon Owen.
Yeah.
I was really challenged out of that conversation. Challenged out of that conversation, I guess, from two spaces. One, from a leadership of a community of faith perspective.
Yeah.
And then another, which is me, individual, Nathan Durs, a disciple of Jesus, and what my individual responsibility is. So there was this kind of duality for me in this tension space that came out of this conversation. And I guess it came out of this conversation for me because Jon affirmed my fear and my observation, which is that the church has seemingly abdicated our responsibility of social connection and social engagement to non-government organisations.
Yeah, I mean, then we need to clarify, right? Like, the idea of social connection and social engagement is not something, because that happens within the church.
No, sure, it does.
It's more this idea of social engagement with those who are less fortunate, marginalised. What does that look like in those kind of areas rather than just social engagements and social connection? I think we were sort of honing in on that area.
Yeah, I think that's probably worth clarifying, at least for, my mum and the three audience members that we have. Yeah, you're right. So it's social welfare in many senses, but it's more than that. But it does seem that we've gone down a sanitized approach within the church. And what I mean by that is that this idea that we get to preach the gospel, and we do so in a fairly sterile kind of environment within the walls of the church.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by that sterilized place, rather than engaging with all people, and particularly those who, as you say, are less fortunate and are marginalised and are struggling, battling mental ill health, those kind of spaces.
Yeah, a whole lot of things,
the nature that the gospel actually isn't a sanitized gospel.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that you and I have had many conversations, and there's so much to mine in that conversation. Like, there is stuff that I think is helpful to talk through on a leadership level. And there's stuff to talk through on a personal level. I love the idea of the story narrative that he kept sort of touching base with, right? Like this idea that, and throughout the thing, different stories and different analogies to help us sort of wrestle and grasp with some of the things that he was trying to bring across. And one thing that sort of stood out to me is Søren Kierkegaard's message of the fireman, right? Like this beautiful imagery, maybe not beautiful, more confronting, right? It's an incredible story though, and I love.
Tell the story, because we've been reading about it, but as I said, for my mum and the three other listeners, like what was that story? Maybe if we can get Andrew to cut to that little snippet from Jon's message, because it is a great. It's a great story.
So do we be silent here now?
Yeah, okay. Let's watch this.
A moment of silence.
Søren Kierkegaard tells a story about this little local village where there's a fireman, and he's so well loved in the town, and they always have dinner parties and celebrate this fireman. And then one night there is a fire, and the town hall's burning down, and the fireman rushes with the truck, and he can't get to the fire because the whole village has surrounded the town hall, and they're all shooting at the town hall with a squirt gun. And he said, and the fireman flies in with the siren saying, "What the hell are you doing?" And they all look at him with this big smile on their faces, saying, while shooting their gun, saying, "What little we do with joy in our hearts." Right? And the fireman says, "Get the F out of the way." Right? There's a fire on. This is not about you feeling good about your contribution. It's about putting out the fire, right? People's lives are burning down, right? And we need to work out ways we can put out the fire. And that's where God's Spirit's at work. So that's one story.
All right. So, and this challenge, right? So I just want to go back to something you said, like this bigger narrative. I want you to explore that, and that there's various stories within this larger story that Jon Owens was painting, and one is this story of that Søren Kierkegaard kind of spoke out, and this idea that this house is on fire. Yeah. And there's all of the neighbours standing around squirting water pistols.
Yeah.
Trying to put out the fire, and the fireman turns up. And as Jon put it so beautifully and colourfully, get the F out of the way.
Yeah, and he can't, and the point was he can't get to it, right? He can't get to and meet the needs. But I want to throw a bit of a curveball that we haven't spoken of yet.
Sure.
That I think that I'm confronted by, right? Two things. One, what if that's the only way they know how?
As in the story, in the analogy,
yeah, in the
is the only gun, right? is that we as the church, we as Christians, only know how to squirt water pistols.
Yeah. That's one thing, right? Yeah. What if that's the only, and what if they'd done that with all sincerity? Now I get the need to actually reach those people, but I wonder if them squirting their water guns is not also a fault of the firemen not training them to put out fires well enough. Like, does that make sense?
No, it does.
So, because I think, as I understood the analogy, the fireman would be your traditional pastor, would be the guy that knows how to maybe engage in that space. And then the social, like the guys that are patting themselves on the back for the squirting the water guns and virtue signaling, and it really is a problem, are people who are just not trained to handle fires.
I think there's two things to that. One, like, in your depiction and kind of assigning characters within that story, and I think that's fair to assign. I wonder if there's a couple of things here, and I feel like we've kind of rushed into this conversation rather than kind of maybe doing a little bit more of the background stuff in terms of the big story.
That's when we cut to the video.
Yeah, no, but in the meta narrative stuff,
sure.
Because you raised it, but haven't kind of went into it. But I think I think that the problem lies in our historical approach over the last 20, 30, 40 years in terms of the church, where I'm not actually sure that the firemen, be that the pastors and the leaders, are actually all that well equipped at being firemen either. So it's hard to be equipped as a fireman to then teach other people to be a fireman, right? In the sense that we've abdicated these responsibilities. We've set up NGOs and parachurch organisations. We've outsourced these things. We have sanitised the gospel. We put pastors through Bible college where we teach them to exegete a passage of scripture. We get them to think about church planting, or we get them to think about leadership development. We get them to think about church history. We get them to think about these things, but this ability to marry the gospel and lead a community into the community. So this ability to be a disciple who makes disciples and leads people to help make disciples, so that we can, when we see the fire, not turn up with water pistols. So I would say that maybe we haven't educated our pastors well enough to be able to think about what are the needs of our own community and how can we meet those needs as a community without outsourcing it. So what resources has God given us in terms of our people and their skill set and their abilities and their understandings that also inform the pastors, that also inform the leaders, that help us to build a better picture collectively to reach and to help the community.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, as I'm listening to you, again, I think that's probably fair. Again, because we've given over the space to an NGO who fundamentally is just going to deal with the messiness of what that kind of life looks like, so that we can live what you were saying, the sanitized Christianity. I agree, and I can appreciate that. I think what I'm trying to do is sort of show that the story that's found in Søren Kierkegaard's books or whatever, wherever it's whatever he in his ministry space, whatever that book is that Jon Owens quoted. I'm just trying to go. It's easy to say, man, these people are in the way of good ministry. But isn't that exactly why then the church would throw up its hands and go, well, we're obviously not equipped and able to deal with this, so maybe the people who are should.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because on the one hand, we do have the issue, I think, that from a leadership perspective, that we're not always well equipped enough to be able to look and see our communities of faith through a healthy lens of discovering needs and then thinking about, how can we meet them. On the other side to that, our own community of faith as individuals, and me as an individual, and as you as an individual, we can't just put it onto the church, because we're also disciples of Jesus. Absolutely. And so we have to take individual responsibility in the midst of that. But I'm not sure if we're equipped in that space. And again, I wonder whether discipleship in such a sanitized way in terms of, historical, traditional church has been helpful for people to think about how they can reach the needs of their neighbours, because the people who live next door to us or across the road from us or down the street from us, these are people who are struggling and finding it tough and battling mental ill health and battling, misfortune and all of the other bits and pieces. And so we equip people and we encourage people to a point, and then they get to have these opportunities. And the question is their intention pure? The answer is always going to be never pure. There's always going to be a mixed motive of, I feel good about supporting and helping people. Yeah. But I also think that there is a genuineness in that too, that says I'm actually helping people. Whether we're helping people in the right way, or that's the question. And I think that's the challenge in Kierkegaard's kind of analogy there, is to say, well, okay, because I don't want to just be the fireman going to the rest of the people, get the F out of our way, rather than saying, actually, hey, jump onto the hose. Let's go together. Let's hook this hose.
Go grab a bucket. The water gun is not.
Let's grab hoses everywhere. Is there anyone in the fire? So we've got to be careful with the analogy, I know, but that's the question for me. the end result is we are in a situation, I think John hit the nail on the head, that we have, to the detriment of the gospel. The churches has outsourced this. And I guess my question out of that is well, what do we do with that? Like how do we change this? That becomes this fundamental question for us.
But I think that's why maybe that's where the meta-narrative is the beginning of what that looks like.
So to talk to me about this meta-narrative.
like-
It's a couple of times you've mentioned it. Let's.
Yeah, and I think this is what Jon Owens was saying. And so the idea is that OBC in this area, or wherever you're listening from, the church in your area has been in that area for a given time.
Yeah.
But that given time is only a part of the story that God has been telling in that area for 1,000 years.
Sure.
Or whatever, right? And so the idea is to ask yourself the question, what's the story that God has been telling, and what's the story that God is currently telling through us? Because that is a vision and a purpose kind of thing, right? Like, God's been in this space, His Spirit's been present here, He's been active, and then considering that, and you may not know the full history, and it may not be as clear as, it's almost like going, well, it's sort of kind of as clear as mud, and that's okay. But even thinking and considering that, the immense gravity of that, and then going, and now I'm a part of that story. I'll give you an example.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for us to kind of ground this in a story so people can get hold of.
So I'll give you an example, right? Like, there's that, we had the Common Ground seminar conference thing, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, 2 seconds. We probably should. So OBC held a conference called Common Ground that involved Baptist churches from within the Western region of New South Wales coming together and to share stories and to be equipped and encouraged for gospel ministry. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And so as we're doing that, part of that was people coming up and going, man, where were you at this time and at this point
sharing
in history?
stories.
And they were sharing their history. And I've only been here 16 months at this point in time, and I'm a part of something greater than my 16 months that I've been here.
Yeah.
But even bigger than that, at that conference, I forget the speaker's name, spoke about the last hymn.
Yeah, so that was Gray. He was one of the breakout.
Yeah.
One of the breakout.
And the last hymn, for those that don't know, is this hymn that they found written in the year AD 200, one of the earliest and the first hymns, the first hymn, that was ever written, that was gospel-centered, orientated around the Trinity, that sort of unpack what they were singing at the time.
Mm.
And we got to sing the song.
Yeah.
We got to engage in the space.
Yeah.
And in that moment, for me, the immensity of all of history weighed on me. It weighed on me in two ways. It weighed on me in the way going, am I actually good enough to be a part of what God has been doing for the last 2,500 years?
Mm.
And then it weighed on me in an even better way going, who cares? God's grace has allowed me to stand in this space and sing the song that was sung 2,000 years ago, so that I become a part of a bigger story.
So if I'm understanding you right, so as we think about how we can engage in our own local communities, to recognize that the Holy Spirit has been at work in our area, in our region, in redemptive ways and restorative ways for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
And so what we're doing is living out the gospel, both in proclamation and life, as if we can somehow separate those two, but together as we live out the fullness of the gospel. So as we share this good news, and as we live out this gospel and caring, loving people and loving God, if you wanted to kind of pack it like that, and we are now part of that story in this season, and we need to work out, well, how do we partner in specific ways?
Well, and I think it's a perspective shift, right? It's not I'm bringing the Spirit.
No,
It's that the Spirit of God has been here and I've come a part of His story.
Yeah.
I'm not coming like...
So it's a process of discernment.
And recognizing that we play a role, and also just harkening back to another one of our podcasts, reckoning with the reality that the church has failed in these spaces sometimes.
What do you mean by that when you say that the church has failed in those spaces? Let's make it clear, like in terms of engagement with community, caring for the marginalised and the poor.
Yeah, and I mean, pressing on a particular form of Christianity that maybe is not, it has ideals or perspectives that are not necessarily formed or rooted in the Word of God particularly, but only rooted in our perspective of what the Word teaches in one sense. But I also think the church has failed in the sense, and we've spoken about this quite at length, in the way that it has been a safe haven for the marginalised. And so this has become a place that's recognised that, there's church abuse that's taken place, and there's pain and there's heartache, and reckoning with that, not brushing it aside, going, man, we have been a part of some pain and hurt and heartache within our community that we need to reconcile and go, yeah, because we're all broken and we're all messed up, and we're all messed up seeking a saviour.
Yeah, so, I mean, there was a lot in that.
No, there's a lot in that, sorry.
And so I think as we ponder that, this church abuse side of things and the failings of the church to both engage and to be a safe haven and protective space.
And I'm not trying to zone in on that. I'm just saying
No.
There is this, as you consider the meta-narrative and this idea that it's clear as mud, some of it is not pretty.
Yeah, and so, but a part of that is that those failings have created a sense of skepticism about the church from a wider community. There's been a suspicion that has occurred, and Jon Owens touched on that Australians by nature are a little suspicious, skeptical of organisations and structures in those ways, and I think he's fair.
The other story is about Australian culture that we really need to grapple with, and Dave Andrews talks about this a lot in his compassionate community work courses in his book, is the starting level, Nick, for Aussies is there's two things, curiosity and suspicion. Aussies are like this: suspicion, curiosity is down here, right? So anything that happens is always met with suspicion, right? Yeah. There are only two real times I can identify that the Aussies' curiosity edges above suspicion, right? And they are at threshold moments, right? And that means if someone's moved into a new neighbourhood, you have about 2 to 3 weeks to knock on your neighbours' doors. You leave it for 4 weeks. People are saying, "What's wrong with you? Are they trying to scope out our house?"
And I think we've maybe the church has added to that, not only because it wasn't the safe place that we've propagated it to be, that we've proclaimed it to be always. And again, the church has done a lot of good things.
Absolutely.
But it also hasn't. So there's a skeptical nature, but then we take the messy side of things and we do then pass that on to NGOs and parachurch organisations. And one of the things that keeps hitting me as I talk to people who are engaged working for those NGOs, both as Christians and those who don't yet know the Lord Jesus, is even the way that they speak about the people in which they're engaging with to bring about these services, right? So all of a sudden, we've handed this stuff over. We've handed over the social concern, social welfare side of things to these organisations, and then these organisations work like every other organisation, and the people that they're engaging with and serving and caring move away from individuals with names to just being called clients. They're clients with an ID and they're a part of a database because everything's about capturing data. And again, they're capturing data because it's It's actually being funded by the government, and so the government put restrictions on the way these organisations need to work and data that needs to be captured inside of those spaces. And every NGO and parachurch organisation are all competing for a slice of the government pie of funding, and so in a sense, they function like any other organisation whose master is actually the funding rather than Jesus, and people stop becoming people and they just start becoming clients in which they are just providing a service, and it just becomes actually disconnected even further in those organisations, which only adds more scepticism, more suspicion, and it feels like it's a real mess. And
Or
my
maybe-
question then is, and I keep asking this question, is what needs to change? Because John made this really clear that not
the gospel writer.
No, Jon Owens. He did. He was very strong on this point that the church has abdicated responsibility, and it needs to start to live out the gospel, recognising that it is going to be messy to do that, and it is going to be confronting to do that, and that comfort will be challenged.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
I think I just want to one step back. You said it is a mess, and I think no, it's all clean and tidy.
Oh, mate, tell me about that.
No, and I think that like it's they're a number, they're a client, they're an individual. Like I don't have to.
No, what I mean by messy is how do we unravel the ball of wool that we've created?
Yeah, sure.
That's what I mean by messy. It's messy in our engagement.
But it's been easy for us. It's been clean for us. It's been compartmentalized. It's been, we just make sure that our church is giving to whatever NGO we think they should be giving to, and then, or I will give directly to that NGO, and I'm sort of wash my hands, and I'm clean. I'm clean at the end of the day.
Maybe. I'm not sure that it's like we wash our hands. I just think it's just removed, right? So we give our funds to these parachurch organisations, these NGOs, we support them in that way, and we feel good about doing that, and we become the water pistol shooters. Like we do it for good reason, but is that actually what we're called to?
No, absolutely not. And I agree with you.
I just think it's going to be messy to figure this out, that how do you move? Because in a real sense, we're asking, how do we move away from the NGO parachurch organisation basis where the church takes more responsibility again of engagement within its own local community?
Yeah.
Like that's really what this comes down to.
But I think, and again, that's why I think part of that is recognizing the part you're playing in the story of God here and now in your community, so that when you're able to see that, you're able to the leaders are able to discern and activate and then create opportunities for the church to engage with their community in that area.
Yeah, and I think you're right. But I think it's more than just this separation of the leaders trying to discover and creating opportunities. Rather, I think it's about a collective conversation within the church that has to be led by the leaders of the church, but recognising that the people within our community have more wisdom and more knowledge and more specialty in engaging with various parts of community that can help this process of a community discerning where the needs are and how we as the people of God can meet them. So in our own community of faith, we are blessed, right? There's like 5 or 6 people who work within social services in across the board who understand the needs of our local community. And we're engaging with them and we're trying to figure this out, because our own story here is that we have been partnering with an NGO for a number of years to deliver service in our own local community, and that relationship has now changed in a fairly dramatic way, based again off funding. And I guess, and I think more than funding, I think it is primarily funding from their end, but I think there is this process where perhaps the church is just is just the people on the ground who does this, but they kind of take care of the back end side of things. And that's not really what we're talking about. We're really trying to discover, what does this look like? And so for me, we have to ask these questions. Why are people suspicious of church?
Yep.
Why are they skeptical? At the same time, there is still this inquisitiveness around Jesus and the gospel. And so how do we take advantage of that?
Yeah.
How do we practically care and show love to people who need it in our community?
Yeah.
And where do we find the resources for this? And when I mean resources, I really don't mean money. I think people are our greatest resource. So I want to make that really clear. They're the questions for me that I want to drill down on.
Sure. And again, it's not. I don't think I'm disagreeing with your point that it is an all of community thing. I think the point you made, and we can just talk about our own space here, right? Like that there are 6 people. It's the leadership's responsibility to go, there are 6 people we can tap into.
No, correct.
Like the leaders
100%.
are going, and then that's all. I'm not
No,
trying
and
to.
that's what
I'm
I
not
said.
trying to isolate the space to go. No, the leaders need to determine. I'm trying to go. No, the leaders first. It's this trickle down idea, right? The leaders first need to go. Lord, there's this discerning, this visioning, this space that says, wow, we feel like God's leading us in this direction. And then what they do is they're starting going, there's people in the church. Let's have conversations
And that's
see.
And that's what I was saying by saying that leaders have a responsibility to begin the conversation.
Yeah.
But it's not the leader's responsibility to build a program that we're trying to recruit people for.
No.
Because I think this is the problem around recruitment rather than buy-in.
Yeah.
And so part of that is, I fundamentally agree with you that our responsibility is to say, as leaders, what, Lord, are you doing in our community?
Yes.
And how do we discern, and what are you calling us into as a community of faith, as individuals, that we can be hands and feet, loving, serving, blessing, declaring the goodness of Jesus?
And then as we engage our community, it's recognizing that maybe not every opportunity is our opportunity to take.
No, absolutely.
Because otherwise
sure.
we're just going to run ourselves off our feet kind of a thing. And the reality is that even in those spaces, while we engage with our church community to saying, hey guys, what do you think we should be doing? It's prayer and discerning going, that's a great idea, but that's not what we're supposed to be engaged in. We think our resources, being our manpower and our people, will be better engaged in this area, and the community will benefit better from this particular perspective than from anything else.
For sure. And then I agree. And so then the question is then how do we help our individuals to recognize that to follow Jesus is going to get uncomfortable? And that as we engage in these spaces of loving Jesus and loving our community in practical ways, that it's going to cost. It's going to cost time. It's going to cost energy. It's going to cost investment, and it's worth it. Jesus is worth it. These people are worth it.
I guess the simple answer, which is simple in one sense and incredibly complicated and messy in the other, is discipleship, right? Like, that's it.
That's the answer.
The simple reality is, well, we've got to disciple our people into that space, and we need to be discipled into that space. We need to be discipled better into that space. If we go back and you're going, I don't know if our church leaders are even equipped in this area. You don't even know if the pastor, being us, are equipped in this area. And so there's a discipleship process that's taking place. And I want to say a discernment process as well. We were talking about suspicion and curiosity, going, when people do become inquisitive or do become curious, that we sort of strike while the iron's hot and going, yeah, now's our opportunity. This is the door that the Lord has opened up for us to engage with this individual on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I'm really thankful to God is that over the years here, he has given us these opportunities to engage in our own local community. And one of the most incredible people in terms of that helped us as a community of faith in my time of being here to engage was one of my best mates of all time, Baz Porter, who tragically died in October of 2022. But before his untimely passing in that regard, and I know the Lord's timing is perfect, but for me the timing sucked. But one of the things that Baz had done here amongst us as he worked, he actually was working for a parachurch NGO. And we together were able to sit and to chat and to dream about how the church might re-engage on a mass scale, but also here at OBC. We were already working off the groundwork that had been done years before I even got here. Where this church had been running a Christmas lunch for nearly 20 years by the time I got here, and we continued to run that right up until COVID, where we were feeding a lot of people on Christmas Day, and it was a great cost. But there was a small group of people in the life of our community of faith who were really passionate about that and did amazing jobs. And then there was also this connection that had started before I got here, where the church were encouraged to bring in non-perishable food items that we could then continue to support a food pantry that is a secular pantry here in our town to support. And so those things were already taking place. So God had that story that God was already at work in those spaces. And so even as the world shifted with COVID, Baz was able to be this kind of person on the ground to help kind of think about, well, how might this shift? And how might we kind of pivot in this space to be able to continue connecting with the community? And a part of that was a genuine partnership with a parachurch organisation, and we were able to start to deliver hampers to people rather than just being a pantry where people came and used us as another service, but rather going out into the community and trying to engage with those people who are suspicious and skeptical, and creating opportunities. And I suppose one of the things that's sad for me is this season of working with this organisation, as I said, due to funding and the likes, is drawing to a close, is those opportunities for these people, for our people who have been a part of that ministry for a long time and built relationships and been praying with people, and that inquisitiveness is seemingly rising.
Yeah.
Right as the social arm of that is kind of stopping. And so this isn't just kind of a 1,000-foot kind of conversation. This is real and tangible for us as a community of faith, because we don't want to lose those connections, and we don't want to just be we don't want to just see this as another organisation that came in and funding got cut, and so now those services aren't available, because I think it only adds to people's skepticism. It only adds to their suspicion, where it's, you're not really interested in me, you're just doing your job for a period of time until the funding cuts, and then someone else will do it.
Yeah, or until something else better comes along for you.
Sure.
But I think what we're saying, though, right, is that even though there was a whole lot of good that came out of partnering with these NGOs, the reality is that's actually the church's responsibility.
No, it is.
And that's
right.
That's what we're wrestling with.
That's right.
That's the reality of it's like, and I'm not saying that, so what does that mean? Like, all churches need to stop with the NGOs and
no, it's not that at all.
I think they still have their place. I think there's also this element that we need to take ownership of what it means to connect and socially engage with the people who are marginalised and are struggling within our community.
And I think in part of that is recognising the great work that a lot of the NGOs and parachurch organisations are doing, and partnering in a meaningful way. So what do I mean by that? I think what I mean is that recognising that the services they provide will always mean there's a limitation to relationship. Right? There's a limitation to relationship because there is a client-provider relationship. It is professionalized.
Yeah.
But I think in part, this only adds to the complexity because people feel isolated. Like one of the key factors in people finding themselves in difficult spaces and in dark mental health spaces is because they're disconnected.
Absolutely.
They're lonely.
Yep.
Right? They're isolated.
And again, this is another thing that Jon Owens touched on, right?
Absolutely.
This is the effect of this disengaged thing, is you're just creating lonely, disenfranchised individuals that...
But even in our service provision,
Yeah.
if it's wholly and solely on a professional transactional base, and what I mean by transactional is not necessarily that they're paying for the service, but certainly the transaction is we're getting funding from the government. We need your data information to report back to the government, and so therefore here's a box of food.
And on a very personal level, I feel good that I've given you a box of food.
I think that there's a big part of that, but
No, I'm just saying it.
But as a side
true,
note,
right?
But what happens is where's the relationship there? Yeah. Where's the community there? You'll never have the depth of community, no matter how lovely the people are who are running the organisation, even if they are Christians. There's a disconnect. And I think that's the space that church and as Christians we can engage in. Because fundamental to the gospel is relationship. Yeah. Relationship with God, the master and creator, the one who has redeemed us in Jesus, the value of being adopted into God's family, which then instantaneously means that not only do we have our Father in heaven, not only do we have Jesus our Lord and the Spirit who empowers, but we have now brothers and sisters in Christ. Like the gospel is completely relationally transformative. Yeah. And that's the greatest need within humanity.
Yep.
So the church has got a responsibility of not just providing food, but as we provide food or we provide service in this regard, we're not doing it in an isolation, but we're doing it because before us is another human made in the very image of God, who is of infinite value and infinite worth, who is being created for relationship with God and his people. And it's the relational space that I think that will, over time, as relationships are formed, that does turn down potentially, and it's just my ponderings, mate, like I'm sure John would, he's probably looking or maybe hearing and going, nah, that guy's an idiot. But what I mean is I think over time in that relationship, potentially the temperature of skepticism, that the temperature of suspicion is turned down. And as that's turned down, the temperature of inquisitiveness rises.
Sure.
Because people aren't seeing themselves as just another project.
And there's a warning there though, Nathan. I think you are... One of the things that Christians become guilty of from time to time, and I'm not trying to blanket anybody with anything, but there is this time to time thing of going, well, I need to make friends with this individual to make sure that they get saved, right?
Yeah.
Salvation is the answer. And so
project evangelism.
Yeah, and so now, again, we're not walking in relationship going, Lord, when curiosity strikes, let me be ready.
Yeah.
If that ever actually happens, maybe they're just close to the gospel. And so we're actually just investing in relationships going, I still want to be your friend. I still want to walk alongside you in the struggles that you're facing. But instead, we've created a client project kind of relationship where it's like, well, I'm going to give you 3 years. And if you don't come to Jesus, see you later. I'm moving on to the next best kind of thing.
And I think Jon Owens kind of hit out of this, right? Like he was talking about, even like people who volunteer at the Wayside Chapel, it's not just Christians who volunteer, right? There can be an atheist. And John was talking about that, right? Like you can have an atheist who turns up every single week, where Christians have this tendency to turn up once a fortnight. And he made a big deal about that. And I would love to engage because I think he's completely right. But that's on the side note. But he's talking about this atheist who turns up.
6 to 8 hours a week, I think.
Right, whatever that was. But the opportunity is people are serving alongside him as he got to see, as he was caring for people and had value for people, but also the value that he was receiving, that all of a sudden when he found himself and his life was going through a bit of struggle and there was sickness and other bits and pieces within his life, that he started to ask for prayer.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't that he was a project, it was just we're living Christianly and with intentionality.
Yeah.
Right? Not just kind of pretend, but we're speaking about Jesus. We're trying to live out Jesus in all of our brokenness, right? In all of our brokenness and all of our failings. And even there, over time, that inquisitiveness rises, not as a project, but as a means of God opening doors, of his heart being softened and mind softened because of circumstances. And as believers then step into that place and taking that opportunity and showing love and grace as they then share the beauty of Jesus. I think at the heart of how we can do this is recognizing that even if we're partnering with these NGOs, there is a limitation and the gap is relational. How do we step into that space? And for some of it, might not be able to happen. And so then I think as a church, we need to then think about, and I'm not talking just about our church, I'm talking about the church, needs to then potentially think about, well, if that can't happen, then maybe we need to step up and we do provide a service that is relationally orientated rather than just service orientated. These aren't clients.
No, they're not. and like, I don't want people who listen to hear that we're saying, well, the gospel sort of gets lost in it and people are not really confronted with their own sin, or it it's just, I think it's saying that we need to see what Jesus sees. We need to have the eyes of Jesus when we look at people and going, man, he probably would see their sin, he probably would see their brokenness, but he would see their humanity, and he would reconcile and understand that this life is a mess. And that's why he came at the end of the day, right?
Right. And it isn't to minimize his atonement. It isn't to minimize Jesus' death for the sin of humanity. It isn't to minimize that. But I guess even as we talk about that, and I do think people, they want to talk about, but that's, you can't be saved through action. And that's true. There is this proclamation of the fullness of the gospel.
Yeah.
There is, that comes with that. And I was certainly not advocating. I'm certainly not advocating a separation of those two things. But I think part of the conversation is that's what's happened historically in the church, right? So, the whole notion of, look at my life and see Jesus. Or, how I live and I'm living well in that space. And I go, well, that's never going to work. You're broken. So how can you see the perfect God in the face of brokenness in that space? So you're never going to fully live that out, which is why the proclamation of the gospel is so beautiful in that space, because there's a recognition that I too am broken and sinful and not perfect. And yet Jesus shows his love and his grace. So why are we separating that stuff when this is actually completely entwined? Like there's something inherently wrong that we think that the social gospel and the proclaimed gospel are somehow at odds to one another. We've divided it, but I don't see that in the scriptures. And so a part of that is we speak the gospel and we live the gospel, and that is through, as the scriptures call us, jars of broken clay, right? Yeah. So a part of that is as we engage with people, as they ask questions, and we're overt in talking about Jesus. I mean, for goodness sake, I can't help it, right? So I don't want to get caught up in this kind of silliness about, but you've got to proclaim it, not just live it. I just don't see the separation.
There's no distinction, yeah.
But I think that's the problem is we have proclaimed it, which is why I think maybe we're scared to engage in other spaces, because it is costly. It's going to take up time. It's going to take up energy. It's going to take up resources, and it's inherently risky. But that's okay, because one of the things that hit me, right, that Jon said, is that church in and of itself in our quest to be good and right and safe and the likes is we actually rightly put in procedures and other bits and pieces to be able to protect people and make sure that everything is as as safe and as possible, but there's still a risky nature to this.
And we look over the last few decades, and every form of church is. I'm not bemoaning the need for greater accountability and oversight in the ways we care for our people and how we do that. When I joke about some of my formative experiences, that means, being thrown on the back of a motorbike with no helmet from a 21-year-old youth group leader to go shooting rabbits, and but
It sounds like
that
a
probably
cracking
shouldn't
afternoon.
happen.
I'm not allowed to do that now.
Your youth, how many formative conversations did you have one-on-one when you were the last kid to be dropped off from youth group? And, now that would just be considered, almost a sin, if not illegal.
And you'll never remove that risk as you engage with people and have people in a space. It's going to be messy.
I think it is going to be messy, and I think we can't just clean it up and tidy it up. I guess my thoughts are, if people are projects, we create this urgency and this tendency to go, we've got to make sure they get the gospel as soon as possible, so that if they reject it, we can close off this project, close off this time. If they accept it, we've done and accomplished, as if their salvation resides sort of within how much we do in a certain given amount of time. And so that's why we quick to hone in on sin. We're quick to hone in on stuff that we deem necessary for the proclamation of the gospel, but very slow to engage with the social gospel. You called it the social gospel, and I like that. I haven't necessarily heard that, and I like that idea that there is this both and there's actually a part of this that's in my heart that's sort of going, we need to reside the fact that we're not their source of salvation.
No, Jesus is.
And he's going to do it as he sees fit in his time.
Yeah, he is.
And, because I come from a place where it was like, you don't know what's going to happen when you walk out on the road right now. That guy might just die or whatever, and you never shared the gospel with them. And so it's like, wow, well, there's a guilt trip you should go on, because we sort of pump this idea or press this idea that proclaiming the gospel is of vital importance. Everything else sort of will work itself out, right? But I like the idea that if it was the case, which God forbid it really never is the case, but if it was the case that person did walk out onto the streets and I never shared the gospel with them, that was God's ultimate desire and plan, right? And it wouldn't reside within me. It's not my fault. It's not something I'm ought to carry.
So I think there's two things in this, right? There is an urgency. There is an urgency that people would know and understand and experience the gospel. There is an urgency. We want people to know. We want them to enjoy the beauty of salvation. We want them to know how wonderful and how awesome Jesus is. We want them to live out this hope-filled, empowered life in the Spirit. We do. We want that stuff. But just because there's an urgency doesn't mean that there's a guilt-tripped panic. And so a part of this is to say,
well, but there's an urgency held in tension. Being, again, it's a complicated thing, but there's an urgency held in tension with God's sovereignty.
No, there is. But
so we can't.
But here's the thing, right? There's an urgency that the church is actually that needs to be urgent in actually engaging. That's the urgency. It's not a matter of just kind of like, oh, well, we just need to time and it is as it is and whatever the case may be. There is this sense in which it's like, well, okay, as we're talking about this, let's get moving. Like there's an urgency in that regard.
Yeah, and I guess I would frame that urgency as obedience to what God has called us to. We should be urgently obedient to what God has called us to, rather than urgently creating projects to bring people to salvation. we remain obedient to God and allow God to work out the salvation of the individual, because that doesn't rest on us. Our obedience is in the proclamation of the gospel and the social execution or engagement of that very gospel, so that
loving God and loving others.
and so that people have opportunities to witness and be engaged with in this area. But the reality of their salvation always rests with God and His Holy Spirit as He's at work within them.
No, 100%. So I think in part of this is we need to create urgency to be obedient in the life of our community. We need to look with clear, discerning eyes, with the help of our whole community of faith, to see the needs of our local community and how we might meet them practically and relationally. We need to think about these. We need to be able to work with organisations who are on the same page as us in that same way.
And recognise their limitations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But they also need to recognise that there are limitations from them, and that's where we can play our role too. So I think it's messy, but I'm really challenged out of what Jon really said. I think we need to really think about how we as individuals, how we as a community of faith live out the fullness of the gospel in our local communities, loving people, caring for people, serving people, and sharing Jesus with them at every step of the way.
No problems. No, I think that's fair. I think that's good, and I think it's right. Yeah, the challenge is there. Disciple your people unto the space. Disciple them unto Jesus and what it would mean to be obedient to Jesus in your local community.
And as an individual, you be the disciple. You take some responsibility. You get cracking too. It's all of the above. Well, I had a great time in our conversation. I don't know if anyone else will make heads or tails of what we were saying, but I had fun. So, I'm really looking forward to our next episode. Hey, we got Patricia Wirracoon coming up very soon.
It's a conversation around sex and marriage.
That's
going to be.
She's an incredible woman, actually. So, Christian woman who is a sexologist and the likes, and prolific speaker. And I think it's a bit of a.
She's so funny.
She's hilarious.
So
I'm really looking forward to having her on pretty soon. So. Hey, stay tuned for that episode. I hope our conversation together stimulated some thought for you, and I hope you're encouraged. Spend some time praying, considering what God is doing in you and wants to do through you in your community. But with that, be blessed, dude. Thanks.
Cheers.
See you guys.